Can AI really help build a startup with no capital? Successful fintech founder Simon Lee from Teamified is joining me to share the tactics he would use if he was going to start all over again. Hello and welcome to Fintech Chatter, the podcast where I chat with fintech leaders about their secrets to success. I'm Dexter Cousins, your host and the founder of Tier 1 People, the executive search firm dedicated to connecting high-growth fintech companies with exceptional leadership talent. With a proven track record in placing top execs, Tier 1 People is trusted partner for many of the world's most recognizable fintech brands. Simon's joining me today where we're unpacking the power of AI for scaling your startup. Simon, welcome back, mate. It's been a while.
It's been a while, mate, but it's always good to have a chat, as always. You've always been a bit of a mentor to me in the recruitment space, so every time we catch up, I learn a lot from you.
Mate, I always learn a lot from you as well. And it's been awesome to, see the journey of Teamified over this last, 5 years or so. But I guess for anybody who's listening who doesn't know you, doesn't know Teamified, could you maybe tell us just a little bit about yourself and the journey that you've been on?
Yeah, so before Teamified, we had a business called Assembly Payments, now Zion MX51. And we had to raise significant capital, and it took a lot of investment, and we got quite heavily diluted along the way. And so when we started our next business, what we wanted to do is we kind of looked at it from how do we help founders get less diluted? In fact, now it's founders and business owners. And it's not so they don't have to raise as much money to get profitable. It's probably turned into a lot now that it's more how do you get businesses profitable from loss-making as points of view as well, now that kind of onshore staffing costs are so expensive. A big thing that we focus on is how do we hire 50% faster than the industry average? How do we produce high performance teams, and how do we do it 70% cheaper? Those are three main things that we drive in the business. And, AI is actually a big part of that. So it'll be a good, interesting conversation today.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about kind of Teamified and when you launched.
Yeah, we kind of started in 2020, and it'll be coming up 5 years around September this year. And we our first couple of years, it was just kind of heyday time because everybody was going remote, everybody needed people. The last couple of years, it kind of took a little bit of a slowdown, and then again this year, last year we grew by 80%, and 80% again will grow this year. So hopefully hitting around 20 mil ARR around June, July this year. Mostly serving fintechs, crypto, digital native businesses. It's quite exciting time for us. In fact, that's how we started, but it's about 60% of I think we're hiring 50 people at the moment, and I think 60% of our open jobs are actually non-tech. And non-tech businesses. So we're kind of making that change, which is quite an interesting new direction for us.
Awesome. Now, one of the things that I guess makes Teamified unique is the platform that you've built as well. So it's not like you're just another recruitment business for offshore talent, but you've actually built proprietary tech in the background to support your clients.
Yeah, that's been a hard journey, especially bootstrapping it without raising capital. And I think you've been one of those ones I've always come and tested the idea with, right? I go, because you're right. Hiring is probably one of the most difficult things you can do. As you said, the JD is useless and the resume are generally useless. And so then when you start from that point, you go, okay, if you're using those as the foundation to start hiring and shortlisting people, how do you make hiring? It's kind of art versus science almost sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's an interesting problem to solve, and the way we've solved it, I think, is actually quite exciting. As you know, that I ran you through it last year, and we're finally turning that on this month.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, awesome. So I guess look, what I wanted to talk about was really, conversation between you and I from kind of these, similar kind of space that we're operating in, but just I guess how it's how we're seeing AI first of all kind of impact the kind of traditional path of kind of starting a business and growing a business, and then I guess the other part would be what are the impacts going to have actually on the kind of for people that are listening that are thinking about their careers as well. So if we start on the kind of founder path, What would you say, if, putting yourself kind of where you were with Assembly, 10 or so years back, and if you were going to start that journey again in 2025, like what are the things that really kind of strike you as, hey, like this completely changes the game?
I think actually one of my ex-business partners, Rigor and Pappy's, just launched a you could call it a fintech. It's a stable coin bank, so you could call it. He more kind of likes to call it a crypto. But what he's done is he's built everything that a banking business, a bank would have, but on stable coins. He's done it purely out of with remote teams out of Sri Lanka, India, and the Philippines, and actually we're just setting up in Brazil and Egypt for him. He's onboarding 2,000 customers a day. I don't know, and he's growing. He can't hire fast enough, so he's hiring huge numbers of people, but purely in outsourcing things, and he'll be profitable in the next couple of months, less than a year after launching. And it's really down to he's been able to do that because of being able to avoid the regulatory hurdles that you have to go through here that cost you need tens of, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to launch and get banking licenses. With a stablecoin bank, he can onboard anyone in the world. He's still getting the on and off ramps via Visa and MasterCard cards and cash and getting money in and out of that environment. But he doesn't need to then go get banking licenses and things. And that obviously, as he grows and scales, he's massively building transaction monitoring, AML fraud teams and things like that. But he's doing them purely. He's not paying the onshore hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. He's hiring those people in kind of in outsourced environments at a third of the cost. And it's just exciting. Like I've never seen a business, nothing I've seen or been that close to, just seen someone get that many signups, right? So if I was doing that again, if I was doing it as a fintech again, I'd be going exactly down that path. It's just amazing.
With that though, I think one of the kind of common pushbacks that you get from people with offshoring is that there isn't the talent. They don't understand, kind of the nuances of the work. There's challenges in kind of communication and actually delegating the work as well. Do you want to kind of give us the reality of, because a lot of that stuff might have been true 5, 10, 15 years ago, but isn't necessarily, we're not in the same world, right?
No, it's completely different now. And in fact, I've always kind of said, if you've picked up your best developer or product person and sent them to a different time zone and got them to work remote, and if you're not set up to work like that, your best guy would become a poor performer. So sometimes it's how you set up the teams to work remote. And I think what COVID did is it set everybody up to work remotely, and it changed the way that they work. So we had it previously in assembly days where one of our guys who was absolutely fantastic went to another time zone and became, and it's, when he wasn't in the office and everyone worked in the office, it didn't work. He became poor performer just because we weren't set up to work with remote people. Now it is set up like that. The reality is that there are, if you look at places like India, especially, the fintech experience you can get there is just so hard to find here in Australia. So it's actually easier to say, if I want a payments person that's got 10 years experience in product and inside payments, and I want to have them experience working on XYZ technologies, you can go to India and you can find that person where there might be only 10 of those people in Australia that exist. So it absolutely works. In fact, we've seen it where we've got product managers in India actually managing all the onshore devs here, and it doesn't really matter where the location is anymore. And especially what we're kind of seeing now that because everyone did go remote and everyone's set up to work remote, and as long as everybody that sets up a remote team treats it as part of their company and not their outsourcer, but it's their Indian team or their Philippines team, and they do it right, in fact, they become more of a high-performing team. And in some cases now, we've got businesses where their entire engineering teams, and apart from their CTO, is remote. They don't even have anyone onshore.
Wow. So why do you think then there's such a kind of premium and emphasis placed on hiring local talent versus offshore?
I think sometimes if you don't set it up right, and there's probably a certain time if you need to be in a room together and work really closely, it may make it easier. It's almost like, okay, if I can get everyone in the room every day, and this is the same thing. If you had a remote team in the same room every day, it's going to make it easier. But if you set up with a remote team, you've got to kind of put some really good principles in place of how you're going to work, and as long as you've got those principles in place, it really, really works. First, when you're first starting out, just having everyone in a room and a whiteboard is really easy. Right?
Mate, it's which business is getting engineering talent to come in every day and look at a whiteboard?
Well, it's down to their own demise in that reality, right? As they want to work from home, and my good mate Schwabby kind of talks about it from founder of Luxury Escapes is, well, if you want to work from home, you're putting your job up, because if you want to work remote, then you can get people for 30% of the cost. They also want to...
Mate, I mean, I made this very point on Ozbiz TV like 4 years ago. I was like, hey, look, if you want to work remote, like you're up against 8 billion people for your job, right? Like that's what you're doing, right? Is you're kind of putting yourself as a commodity, not as an asset. And I think that's kind of one of the... Seems to be that, there is a little bit of a kind of shift now in recognition that, hey, kind of why we're doing this is madness.
So what are you seeing in the changes of the market now that people are kind of getting more accustomed to outsourcing and the rise of AI just becoming, people are coding with it now, people are using AI agents. What are you seeing in terms of the type of roles that have been hired in Australia versus what was being hired 4 years ago?
Yeah, look, I mean, I kind of, first of all, I would say in terms of my business, I haven't really seen there be a detrimental impact.
You're mostly executive search.
Yeah. And so kind of what we see is, we're always doing the mission critical hires. So I think that has kind of, we've been protected a lot from what's gone on more broadly. But if you look at the last 2 and a bit years, I mean, product, marketing, sales, customer success have been massively impacted.
Yeah.
So where you've got, if you put an ad up for, chief marketing officer or, somebody in marketing, you're going to get thousands of applications. And typically those people are on the market for 6 to 9 months. Really hard, really tough going.
And we've seen similar in that space, because what we can get now is you can get an awesome content writer for $1,500 a month outsource, and they can use AI to write high quality content, and it's on.
And we've seen, it's kind of impacting also agencies here, right? So, I've got instances where clients have been able to, do 10x cheaper and actually have better outcomes.
Yeah.
The work that they were putting out to marketing agencies. So I think that's, absolutely, there's an impact there. And anybody who's kind of saying, AI is going to augment you to do jobs. Well, it's a bit like saying, the kind of blacksmith, when the motor vehicle was coming out was, like, oh, well, we'll do rubber hoofs, right, instead of metal ones. It's kind of, it's like the whole kind of, there's a kind of quantum shift, right, to, what technology can do and is going to replace humans to do. So I think that's absolutely kind of starting to play out. Where it is getting really interesting, the capital markets, and if you look at the headline number, it's been pretty positive. But if you then break that down, it's been a few big raises. And interestingly, those companies that have raised quite a lot of money haven't done a lot of hiring. Some mission
is that what you're seeing? Are you seeing that as well? That just, what do you think is going to change in the next 5 years in terms of capital requirements now that you can build things for less? What do you think is going to,
I just think, well, let's talk about your experience, right? And it's pretty much this experience of every founder, that if you look at the venture capital market here in Australia, it's operated more like private equity. It's been really risk averse. And if I look at and consider some of the term sheets that have been going around the last couple of years, where there's provisos there that you can pull your money out after 3 years, there's been zero investment or kind of appetite for actual innovation. And so we saw this with the neobanks, where you're talking about decades long to build a bank the way that they were talking about doing it. And nobody had the patience. So I think what we're seeing is kind of settling of, well, we're not the US, we're not the UK, we're Australia, right? So this is what we're about. And I think what it's then done is, we're actually a nation of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? Like, that's the reality, right? Like, if you look, we've got 2.5 million small micro businesses, right? That means that's 2.5 million business owners, right? Like, that's 10% of the population, small business owners.
Yes.
Right? Like, population, not the working population, the population, right? So what I'm seeing is, I think there's now this thing of, what the have we been doing? Like, putting a pitch deck together and then going out and begging people for money. When now actually you go back to, it's kind of like the old days, right? Where I remember having the guys from World Nomads on, the guys from Tyro, right? They were all starting businesses where, they were maxing out a credit card that had like a 3-4 grand limit on it.
Yeah.
And they had to get servers and all sorts of stuff. Right?
And they'd run off that though.
Yeah, and they would run off that.
Atlassian, right?
Yeah.
Atlassian was slowed on their credit cards.
Yeah, exactly, right. So what we're seeing is kind of a return to those, you want to talk about democratizing entrepreneurship. Technology is the democratizer. And I think what we're seeing are those people who, I think, kind of focus first of all on what's the problem, who's got the problem, how do we solve it, and how do we do that for money, right, and for profit, where we can build a business. And so we're starting to see those businesses thrive, right? Like, good examples being, kind of Julian at, Loan Options.
Yeah, done amazing.
Yeah.
Right. And it was getting too expensive to build, right? So that was the problem. You might have the right problem, you might have the right way to go about solving it, but you just simply couldn't go and actually build something without raising a huge amount of capital. Now it's bringing it back to the ability to be a garage builder, build a business in a garage, which is really exciting. It's great for the small business owner.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they can do things for cheaper. They can get a whole marketing team for $6,000 a month, coupled with AI to enhance the service they've done, and they can start living off the profit of their business, not having to go there and beg for money, and end up with 10% of their business at the end of the journey, and probably a mental health issue.
Yeah, look, I think one of the kind of other differences as well from when you started, or Atlassian started, is YouTube. And I think it's kind of one of the greatest learning resources. In fact, the greatest learning resource I think that humanity's ever created, right? But also, there's a lot of bullshit on there. And I kind of thought that was a nice segue into AI agents, because, you go on YouTube, everybody's telling you you can create a business where it's just you and you've got all these AI agents. I'm working my way through how that actually works. And there are some bits that are cool and other bits that are just an absolute nightmare. But what's your kind of take on AI, and is it going to completely replace everything? Is a guy like me going to build $1 billion business and just have an army of AI agents, or do you think that's kind of maybe a bit further down the track?
I think we've had this conversation last year where you're talking about there'll be that single man $1 billion business, right? Definitely, that's probably going to end up happening, especially with some of the very intelligent people out there. But my kind of opinion on where you look at where the industry's been going is, and especially when you look at things like outsourcing and work, is it was, as you said, it was starting to get so expensive to build things, and outsourcing was kind of solving that, but it was growing. Outsourcing was growing at 9.5% year on year. It's a $1.6 trillion business that's going to double again in another 5 years. And it was coming unsustainable as well, and it was actually getting more expensive for outsourcing. So if you look at, less than 20% of the world is considered a kind of developed country, right? And as the rest of the 80% of the world comes out of kind of poverty and becomes developed, you just simply, without AI, that simply isn't going to happen. So when you look at the developing countries coming out and becoming first world countries, there's going to be all these other services. We're going to have to do so many more services, because you look at what the developed world consumes. We consume so many services compared to developed countries, right? So when I look at it, are we going to be all out of work? No, but we're going to have AI help everyone actually come out of poverty. So I see it a really good thing for the economy, and I also see it a great thing for small businesses to be able to thrive and get more profitable. The biggest thing I kind of see at the moment is, and where we're at the moment is, it's kind of dumb smart AI, right? Like you can ask it some stuff and it gives you some really brilliant insights, but if you don't ask it that specific question that you need to, it will give you the wrong answer, right?
I don't know about you, right? But I find like the first 3 or 4 goes, it's really good, and then it just starts to shit itself. And I can't help but think that for the first 3, we've actually got a human there going, "Oh yeah, but let's sort this out." And then it's like, you know, you kind of get overwhelmed, and it's like the machine has to kick in, and that's when it yeah.
Well, it's cost recovery. And just more questions you ask, the less resources it throws at the answer or something.
Yeah.
But and so what we kind of seen, I think we touched on this before we started recording, is you see really good senior developers become 30% better at coding, but you see really junior developers just become really shit coders because they're using it to produce the code, and they produce garbage and tie garbage together. So you still need the really good senior developers, and you still need to develop the junior developers to become good developers to use AI to help them. But, you know, I think it's really exciting, and, you know, we're both in roundabout bay. I'm doing outsourcing, but it's still, you know, the primary thing is we have to recruit. I'm seeing a massive improvement in the way to use AI to help the recruiters recruit better. And that falls back primarily to something you've always talked about, is the job description generally doesn't really fit the job, and it does. And most of the time, this is your words, not mine, and I've learned you're right, 100% right on this, is sometimes the actual person hiring doesn't know what they really want, and also the resume doesn't match them. So we worked on how do we use AI to solve that problem, and I think it's absolutely exciting what we're doing there, and already in testing produced results where on average it takes 45 days to hire a tech person. We've cut that down to 22.
Right? I mean, Simon, right? Like every week I get somebody who reaches out saying, "We're going to solve recruitment," right? Wanted to run the idea by you. And I have to say that same thing over and over and over again. Right? So everybody thinks it's matching the job description to the resume, and it's not, right? It's like the thing that really frustrates me is like, these are all entrepreneurs and founders, right? First principles, right? Like, what's the problem you're trying to fix? And they can't see it, right? It's like, look, right? Like, you know, think back to your own experience, right? Like what you've done. And it's amazing how people can't get beyond that thing of what they actually do day in, day out, and how they've approached the problem. And then apply that to something like recruitment.
But you have to admit, I come to you probably 4 or 5 times thinking, I've solved it this time, right? And you're like, no.
But it is the thing though, right? Like, it's because you kind of look and you go, that's where the dollars are, right? The dollars are just to solve the pain point, right? And the customer thinks that is the pain point. And I think that's the problem, right? It's like, you know, to create a business that you want to be successful, where you have to re-educate the whole market, that's a lost leader, right? Like, you're just never going to make money where you've got to educate the customer.
Do you know a good recruiter in-depthly understands the client, right? And the longer they work with them, or the more experienced they are, the better they get at that. And the hardest thing you have to do then, and what everyone in our business says, we've got the best recruiters and that's why you should use us. But you can't replicate amazing recruiters, but you can what we've started to do is transcribe the client interviews when they're interviewing, listen and record those to the questions they ask and the live feedback they give us, and we store that on the client. So every time we hire for them, we know the questions they like to ask, what sort of things they like. And if we record 10 to 15 interviews from the client, we really in-depthly know what they want. We use AI to transcribe, listen to that, shortlist that, and give our recruiters questions to ask when they're hiring. That's going to help. That helps us then hire better, because a bad recruiter then knows what a client wants because it's been given the questions to ask based on transcribing and shortlisting those calls, right? The other thing we've started to do is, it's really hard for a recruiter to think about, you know, when they hire a .NET developer versus a PHP developer and everything. And the old recruitment tools used to give you static questions. Now we can, based on using the JD and the client's previous interview stuff, real-time generate really technical questions for them to ask. have a transcriber listening to the answers and rating those answers and giving them follow-up questions. So a recruiter can suddenly become a really good technical recruiter, right? Which would generally take you years and years to train. But all they're really doing now is listening to the AI and actually asking those questions. The other thing we can do is have, at the end of that, we can do quality assurance on our recruiters, making sure they're doing high quality interviews, but also have a really good senior technical person review the thing, go, were those dummy answers? Did the AI rate those answers properly, and do a 5-minute review and go, yeah, that's actually a really good candidate, or no, actually AI fucked that up. Yeah. Let's move it out, right? So that's what we're seeing, huge improvements.
What are some of the best AI tools that you've seen so far?
Look, I just look to be honest, I've been in Anthropic and ChatGPT, and I'm a massive user of ChatGPT, and I just love it. But Copilot for coding for us is giving us a really big improvement. One thing, we're not using Hugging Face, but Hugging Face, I just really love it and want to figure out how to use it, just because it's bringing everything together in one place and all the LLMs and everything. I don't know if you've had a look at that. It just looks really, really interesting. It's almost like a middleware of, you can just, your video, your transcription, your kind of 3D production, your coding and everything there. And I think that looks really cool. And it looks like the growth that they're having is absolutely phenomenal. And then the other one, I've been kind of playing around a little bit. So we're doing a lot of Figma designs and stuff like that, and changes to our website at the moment. And I kind of should be leaving this to our CTO, but every weekend he gets a few messages from me going, hey, how cool is this? And it's like, probably need to put me back in my box a little bit.
Yeah.
Considering I haven't been a developer for 20 years. And I'm trying to tell him really good ideas, and he's like, no, stop. But I was playing around with V0 by Versal on the weekend, and just seeing how it can convert Figma designs into code, into Next.js, and optimize it and stuff. And you kind of have to start looking at that and going, oh, I wonder if things like Workable and Bubble and stuff like that, which are kind of no code ways to build your website, whether that's still going to be needed, or whether you're just going to talk to AI and it's going to fix everything. And then that's the biggest fundamental change I see happening, right? Is that we've come from these things like HubSpot and these really and Workable, that is actually an ATS, and Webflow that is for your websites and stuff. And you need training on how to use these things. And it's going to really, it's the rise of AI means, instead of actually getting an integrator for HubSpot to come and set up and build how you want HubSpot to work, soon you're just going to talk to this thing that's going to set it up how you want it to work, right? And all these expensive consultants that you're going to need to set up your environment, it's just not going to exist in 5.
Yeah. So a couple of questions that I've got for you. The first one is, when it comes to outsourcing or offshoring, what would you say are the most optimized functions to do that for, and what are some of the functions that you think, it might work as well?
Look, there's what we're seeing a massive rise in now, especially now that we do non-tech roles, is those roles, like you said, the marketing roles, bookkeepers, and accountants. There's a global shortage of accountants now, right? And so we've got a company now where there's the CFO, and they used to have 5 people underneath them and 1 outsourced. Now they've got the CFO, and the whole team's actually outsourced to the Philippines. Philippines is a great place for accountants. You wouldn't go to India for Australia, for example. But you're kind of seeing that really taking off. Marketing roles, support roles, it's just a no-brainer to do support. It's a 10th of the cost. And then when you look at the type of dev roles you do, and depending on the type of dev roles you do, so for example, if it's things like Golang and Elixir and things like that, you just wouldn't go to places like the Philippines for it. You go to India, but you just do get some really experienced people there. But yeah, one of the things we kind of think about is, it does make sense. I don't think we have 6 people here in Teamified, and out of the Teamified staff, we have 39 remote, right, that work directly for us. And so we're pretty much, if you look at that, that's almost 10% of our business is onshore and 90% is offshore. And then we have our remote teams that we set up for clients.
Yeah.
We're probably on the extreme end, I think, but I do think now it should almost be a 40 onshore, 60 offshore split at least.
Yeah.
Right. Just for the cost benefits. What about you? If you had your crystal ball on, what do you think? do you think executive roles can be replaced or outsourced, or do you think it's just going to be more that it's going to be small executive roles here and AI and
Yeah.
outsourced teams? Or what do you think?
I was actually going to ask you this as well, right? Because I think one of the things that I've found is one of the biggest, what's the word? Yeah, kind of marketing fluff things is fractional execs and how that's pushed out. And I think as a concept, it sounds brilliant, but in practice, I've yet to see it work. I think if I look at who, there's maybe 3 people in my network who've been able to do it really well. And how they've done it has been that they've had to really select one client and focus on that client for 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. This notion that you can have 3 different clients on the go at once working in this space, and the founder call and say, there's a fire, I need you to put it out. And you go, oh, I'm not due in until Wednesday next week. We'll do it then. It's like, it just doesn't work. So I think for execs, like, it's a 24/7 job.
I actually think you're right. We actually went out there last year going, okay, how do you really optimize a remote team and still have, the right support here, especially with non-technical founders or stuff like that. And you're right. I don't think the fractional model works. I don't think it works on a CTO level. I think it can work on a CMO level. Because a CMO level can put in, like I've got a fractional CMO at the moment that works inside Teamified. We don't have a full-time one. And she has a permanent remote team with us of 4 people doing her work, but they can set the strategy and actually deliver things. But it has to be almost, I don't think they sit across 3 clients. I think they can set 2.
Yeah.
And if they can do 2, that's okay. And it's probably similar with a CTO too. If they fit across 2, that's okay.
Yeah.
The only issue is with the CTO is then they want to charge, if they're sitting across 3, they want to charge $10,000 to $12,000 a month themselves. And then if they want to sit across 2, they want to charge $15,000, right? And you look at that.
Like, that's not a business, right? Like,
it's too expensive.
Not a exactly. It's like, hang on a second, right? If you want that, go and get a permanent job. This isn't, and I think this is where there's a big disconnect, right? Is that people are looking at this as a lifestyle thing.
Yeah.
Whereas the people that you're looking to serve are like, they're in the trenches, right? Like, it's like they're not going to pay $15,000 a month for somebody to be on holiday whilst, you're kind of, the village is burning, right? Like, it's
well, that's it. If you go to our website right now, it talks about fractionals, and then in 3 weeks' time, that's not going to be there because it doesn't actually work. And unless you get and in fact, when people pitching themselves as CTOs and wanting to claim that money, it's actually, they don't actually need a CTO at that level anyway. When they're startups, they actually need a really good engineering manager or a product person. Well, the thing we can do too, though, is you can get a really good principal lead in India for $8,000 a month, and they would be just as good as an engineering manager and cheaper than a CTO, and they can actually deliver what you need. So why would you pay that much for a fractional? So we actually got rid of our principal model, bringing it back, and we're not offering fractionals anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's actually not the best thing for the client. They end up paying more.
All of the noise comes from the supply side.
Yeah.
The demand side, like, I have this conversation, and I don't think anybody has ever told me anything differently to what we've discussed.
Yeah.
And I think, I've kind of got to look at that and go, okay, this isn't a new concept, right? I was looking at this as a business model way back in, when I started this business. And it was, hey, do I kind of pivot and go off and do that? Or do I stick with recruitment? What was really interesting, Simon, was I kind of went and I spoke to a lot of VC, and they were all like, yeah, the concept's amazing. But we kept asking this question, right? Like, one, how do you get trust? Right? You've got to have trust there, right? So, like, how do you get the trust? Well, it's not going to be like a kind of, trust pilot score. And Johnny in Canberra gives Kevin 5 stars, right? It's like, it comes through your networks and actually previously demonstrating what you've done, right? And having that context. And then I think the other challenge that comes with it is just around, kind of the deployment perspective, right? Like, the reality is any platform, and whether it's Expert 360 or whatever, right? The people that are sitting on there aren't in demand.
No.
Because if there were, they wouldn't need to be on the platform.
Yeah.
If you're not in demand, right, the reality is that there are people out there that are going to get better results than the people that are sat on that platform. And I think it's kind of one of the myths and the lies that's come out from COVID of, oh yeah, you can work anywhere. Hey, look, you can do the job anywhere. But the expectation isn't that you do the job. It isn't that you perform the tasks. It's that you deliver results. And delivering is very, very different to working. So I think that's kind of, for me, I don't really see essentially much change. I think what is going to happen is middle management, that layer gets totally rinsed. It always does in any downturn, right? We've seen this in 2010 when all of the big corporates in Australia offshored to India. All middle management gets rinsed. And then unfortunately graduates in the kind of lower level roles, you just lose that next wave of talent coming through, and the talent pipelines are massively reduced.
I think on that middle management, it's always down to value exchange. And as you said, if they ask for 250 grand a year and they don't want to come in the office and they don't really want to work hard, is what they've got to do now is for the value exchange is they've got to go, right, if I want that.
I think they've not grasped, right, that it's not a contract for time anymore.
No.
It's a contract for like your life, right? Like it literally is. And I think, it's like the stress and everything else that you have to deal with. Yeah. That's what the contract is.
Yes.
I think there's just been a lot of, and we're seeing this in society, right? And I don't want to get into politics and all that stuff. I think there's a lot of nonsense going on. But there is a fundamental reality that you have to deal with, right? And that is that it's called work for a reason. And it's not meant to be easy. It is stressful. It isn't psychologically safe, right? It's hard, right? It's really hard. And I think we've got like generations now who believe that it should be easy and on their terms.
Yes.
I don't get to go to a client and go, yeah, you're going to work with us and it's on my terms.
Yeah.
Is this guy?
The problem is now there's alternatives where before there was no alternatives. So you the employer was held to ransom a little bit and kind of had to offer all these really nice, attractive terms to kind of, as you said, hey, I'll pay you just for your time, and then anything else you give me, it's a thing, right? But it's now,
and this is the irony, Simon, right? If I look at the top performers, they're not interested in that stuff. They're interested in building something that means something to them.
Yeah,
being around the best people, right? And actually like learning and being challenged and taking it to the next level, right? And I'm not saying that they're kind of obsessed with being burnt out, but they're obsessed with delivering and, the kind of the sacrifices that come with that, they're prepared to accept them.
Yeah, well, that passion for the job and building stuff is the risk of burnout, but you've just got to balance it right between the passion for the job and also having, you're putting your health and your physical, mental state first, family second, and then your passion for the job third, right?
Yeah. And look, I don't know if you listen to Alex Hormozi podcast, but he says something which I think really resonates with me. And it's where people kind of challenge him, right? Or, they'll question like him what he's done. And he'll say, hey, look, it's kind of like you want my results, but on your terms and your way of doing it. And that's not how it works, right? Like I've got these results because here's all the things that I've had to do, the sacrifices I've had to make, the friends I've lost, the health, the this, the that, right? Like the pressure, the stress. Yeah. You want my outcome, but you don't want any of those things. And you can't have it, right? And I think society has tricked everybody into thinking that you can have that without all of the downside.
Do you know the biggest change? I want to go back to fractionals in a sec, but the biggest change I've made, it's only been in the last 3 months. I think I said I've just done 16 weeks, no drinking and all sorts. And I always used to go, right, family's always my priority, and then it's the business, and then it's my mates. But what would actually happen is quite often your business would go, business would be taking priority and family, and you'd be trying to balance it, but business would always end up taking priority. You're trying to get between the two, and then you try catching your friends, and your fourth one is, I need to be healthy.
Yeah.
and you'd end up, you've probably seen me balloon out and kind of become like, and when you get really stressed with everything else, you end up drinking too much, and eat the wrong foods, and you hit burnout because you're working too hard and everything. And the biggest change I've done that's ended up being that I'm actually 3 times a better dad and 3 times better at business. And it was actually the only thing that you realise is, and I was actually listening to some podcasts and stuff and getting some advice is, the number one thing needs to be your mental, physical health first. And if you actually really focus on that, you end up being an awesome dad and husband, and you're 3 times better at your business, and you don't burn out, right? And it's the biggest change I've made, because I used to always put myself number 4, right?
Yeah.
And now it's actually, no, my health is number 1, and then I'm so much better at everything else because of it.
Yeah. Well, and look, I think it's interesting you say that, right? Because my distinction that I would ask people, is that if you were to think of business like sports, right?
Yeah.
When you're doing startup, right, you're like Premier League. If you're working for a big corporate, or you're working like just a regular 9-to-5 job, and that's what you want, right? That's Sunday league that you play with your mates for a bit of exercise and a bit of fun, right?
Yeah.
Whereas startup is like the real deal. Yeah, peak performance, super competitive, high pressure. Everybody's looking at you. Everybody wants you to fail, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the reality of what being in a startup is like. And I think kind of what a lot of businesses and founders have done is they've tried to appeal to the Sunday league player, come and join a Premier League club, rather than just going, look, this is who we are. And I tell you who does this better than anybody else is Revolut. This is who we are. It's what we're about. This is our vision, right? Like, you want to be on board. It's a rocket ship. Get on.
Yeah.
But we're not for everybody, right? Like,
yes,
in fact,
exactly.
we're only for like a small percentage.
Well, actually, in those Premier Leagues, they're not out there drinking or partying or doing things or seeing their friends, and they're living quite a focused life.
Yeah, exactly, right. So, I think that's kind of the analogy that I would use for, particularly founders, is that when you're going out and you're looking for people, you got to recognize that it's not a skill shortage, it's not a talent shortage. It's just that, hey, look, it's just mindset, right? Like, you got to find people with this mindset, and that there is only like 10% of the workforce who has that mindset.
But I think about it like a sport too, and in fact, like I look at assembly and the exit as like I got a bronze medal there, and it's not, you're not chasing an exit, or you're not chasing the kind of, but it's like an AFL player, they want to win the grand final, but it's not about winning the trophy for them, it's the fun of the sport, and so that's I kind of think of running a startup like that is. And probably in startup and scale up land is the exit is the trophy, right? But you're not doing it for the exit, you do it because you love it. And if you're doing it for the exit, you're never going to get it, right? Because the AFL player goes, I just want the trophy, and I don't really enjoy the sport. They're never going to win the sport. But if you love the sport of startups and you love doing it, then you're going to end up getting that, more likely to get the trophy. But you're not doing it for the trophy. You're doing it because you love it, and it's so much fun, and you're addicted to it. But you're right, you've got to then run your body like a professional athlete.
Well, and I think this is the other challenge, though, right, for everybody, is that sooner or later the passion goes, right? Like, I remember catching up with you the end of the assembly days, mate, you weren't passionate, right? Like, you weren't loving it, right? And I think what happens is you go through these waves, right? And it's kind of your responsibility to find the thing that's going to give you fire. Like, I'm going through it right now, right? Like, it's like, 9 years of the business. It's like, okay, what does the next 10 years look like? Where am I going to find the fire, to kind of push on through that next 10 years, right? Because it's not going to be the stuff that, the last 10 years, right? Like, it's, so I think that's a challenge that faces everybody, right? It's like, where are you going to get that from, right? Because the passion has to come from something. And, once you get that bit, it's like, well, how do you get passionate about that, right? Like,
exactly.
Kind of bored with being passionate about that, right? Like, I want to
be
passionate about something else, right?
Well, mate, I'm coming up. I'll be 5 years in September, and Teamified, and it's like and reinventing what we're doing again to make sure we're staying. So 9 years. Congratulations, mate, on that one.
And then the other thing is that you kind of, and this is one of the things that I keep saying to people is, oftentimes when you're outsourcing stuff, you're outsourcing your learning.
Yeah.
To kind of, I like to, learn how to do it or send it to somebody and then bring it back in house, right? Because I want to understand how everything works, right? Because if I don't, right, that's when
with your
things
business,
start.
you kind of need to.
Yeah. But it's, one is there's the kind of personal enjoyment that comes from development and growth and learning new things and keeping fresh and inquisitive, right? So there's those benefits. But then the other is like, nobody knows my business better than me, right? Nobody knows my clients better than me. So, what I like to do is kind of get that, how do you do this? Like, how do you do it? And then tweak things that.
But that's that passion you have, right?
Yeah.
And that's what kind of keeps you passionate about doing what you're doing, right? I was going to ask you, and I've got my thoughts, and I think we both believe that the rise of AI is probably just as exciting as the invention of the internet, right? It's just going to fundamentally change things, and it's the biggest change that's happened other than the internet in my lifetime. What are you really excited about seeing that's going to fundamentally change for founders of businesses, and actually, what do you think is going to change in the technology landscape? What are you most excited about?
So the thing I'm most excited about, like when I was a kid, I was about 8 or 9 years old. I lived in the north of England, and we had 30% unemployment. And we were like a mining town and shipbuilding, and both those industries were destroyed overnight by Thatcher, right? So you could look at kind of the US, and there's almost like a similar kind of period that they're going to be entering that was kind of the 80s in the UK. The biggest difference now is that back then, like, you could only get a job if you moved cities, right? Or countries, right? Yeah. Most of the guys had to go to the Middle East and work on oil rigs and stuff like that. So I think one of the things, or the thing that I'm most excited about, is this true democratization of being able to start a business.
Yeah.
You don't have to go the path of going to university, getting a degree, getting a job, doing a grad scheme, and kind of climbing this ladder, and you get to the top of it and you go, like, I've climbed the wrong ladder, right? Like, I remember the advice I was given when I was younger was, pointless climbing the ladder of success if it's up against the wrong wall. The other one is, if you win the rat race, you're still a rat. And so I think what we really are at a point, right, where, and it amazes me that, kind of the world seems to be just shitting itself all the time, when we've got this opportunity in front of us. And right, this isn't to be dismissive of, kind of issues that are happening around gender and diversity and everything else, but the narratives keep coming about why it's impossible to launch a business, why women aren't getting funding, right? Like, I think we're kind of looking in the wrong avenues, right? Rather than empowering ourselves and going, wow, this is an opportunity to create whatever I want to create, right? I can do it. And which kind of comes to my last question for you. We touched on this earlier about the Atlassian guys.
Yeah.
You got $5,000, right, on a credit card. You've lost everything. Yeah. And your missus is saying to you, go and get a proper job. But you can't do it yourself. And you've got to say, we've got $5,000, trust me, in the next 30 days, we're going to turn this into a business. What would be the things that you would do?
Well, what I think's really exciting about I'm just going to kind of go on to your last answer before. What I think's really exciting is I think every single SaaS application probably needs to be reinvented. And you kind of look at it at the moment, and they've been fundamentally built with an interface where you had to sit there and configure and build everything. And I think it's really exciting if you're going to start a business right now. Every single piece of recruitment software needs to be completely rebuilt. Every HubSpot and customer relationship management platform needs to be rebuilt. Every single kind of thing needs to be rebuilt and thought about being an AI service orientated in the way that you're going to communicate and set up things. So if you're starting a business now, it's really exciting, and the cost to build them now is significantly less, right? If I had $5,000 though, and I had to go and start a business, I love ideas, and I call them stupid, dumb business models, right? Which is something that everybody needs, that can help someone, that you can start with a very low tech base. So you don't have to, if you had $5,000, for example, and you need to start making money in 30 days, you're going to have to get something up and running really quickly. Now, really quickly, like what I love about Teamified and outsourcing is it's so manual. It's you set up out to go to outsourcing, and the hiring's manual and the management people are manual. None of them, 99% of them don't even have a platform to manage it and everything. But it's actually quite easy to set up something like an outsourcing business. Yes, you have to jump on a plane and go to India and set up. So for $5,000, you probably wouldn't do that. But I kind of look at it at the moment and go, how many products could you get up and running? So if it was me and I had $5,000, I would set up a business that you could store your blood work, store your DNA test, store your microbiology, microbiome test into a single location, and sync stuff like your health data into it. So you could build that very simply, and use that, and for $5 a month, get all your data stored together and have AI be able to give you advice, health advice. And I'd then turn that into things where you could buy stuff like red light therapy, hydrogen bottles, get a supplement plan based on your blood work. So you could sign up to a $200 a month plan where your supplements get sent out to you once a quarter. You go get your blood work. I think everyone that's supplementing are probably supplementing the wrong supplements, and they should be getting blood tests, everything. So I'd go set a business up like that. Probably you could get, if you did it really light, the first thing you'd do is just a simple data storage using ChatGPT to give you some non-medical advice. But how easy would it be to put an e-commerce shop on the front of it to start selling supplements and then do a subscription-based supplement plan? And $5,000, you get something up and running. I reckon you could create $1 billion business over time. But just something where you're selling a product and it's not high tech to do it.
Yeah.
And you could do it really cheaply. And something that I've actually got really passionate, more than fintech now, is I'm passionate about health. But I also think longevity right now, and it's going to be, I don't think our kids are going to drink alcohol, right? I think it's going to be a really big thing.
Well, we're coming to a wrap. Where can people find out more about Teamified?
You or reach out to me on LinkedIn. Always happy for a chat. Love talking to other founders and talking about how they optimize their business. As we said, we started this to help founders not get diluted to 10% like we did in Assembly, and to just scale and get more done. So always happy to have a talk.
Awesome. Great to see you again, mate.
You too, Dexter, and always great chatting. You're always full of great advice.